Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's something nobody warns you about when you become the kind of woman who truly feels for other people. Nobody tells you that you're empathy. The very thing that makes you the one everyone calls, the one who always knows what to say, the one who can sit in a room full of grief and hold it. That same gift can be quietly, systematically turned against you. Not by strangers, by the people closest to your heart. Maybe you already know what I'm talking about. Maybe you felt it the moment I said it. That small, cold recognition in your chest. Because you've been there, you are there. Someone in your life, a grown child, a partner of decades, a sibling you've loved since before you had words for love, has learned to read your tenderness like a map. They know exactly where to press to make you feel responsible for their pain. They know that if they cry, you'll apologize. They know that if they go quiet, you'll chase them. They know you'll carry guilt the way other people carry a purse, automatically without even checking what's inside. That's not an accident. That is dark empathy. And here's the part that takes the breath right out of you. The person doing it, they may not even know they're doing it. Some of them have just learned, over years and years of life, that your compassion is the one door that never quite closes, so they knock on it, over and over, in ways that look like need, that feel like love, but leave you standing in your kitchen at 11 o'clock at night wondering what is wrong with me when nothing is wrong with you. You have spent so much of this life being soft in a world that rewards hardness. You learned early, maybe from a mother who needed tending, maybe from a household where your feelings were the ones that got set aside. You learned that love means making yourself smaller so someone else can breathe. That being good meant being available. That your worth was bound up in how much you could give before you broke. And so you became remarkable at it. You became the sanctuary, the steady one. The woman in the room who everyone exhales around because they know you will hold whatever they bring you. But here's the quiet truth that deserves to be said out loud. In the daylight, without apology, sanctuaries can be emptied. Not loudly, not all at once. It happens in 10,000 small moments. The time you bit your tongue because it wasn't worth the argument. The birthday when you celebrated someone else's feelings about your birthday. The phone call you took at midnight, even though you had a doctor's appointment at 8 and your hands were already shaking from exhaustion. The way you rewrote your own story, the story of what happened, of what was said, of what hurt you. Because the other person seemed so sure of their version that you wondered if maybe, just maybe, your memory was the one that was broken. It wasn't. Your memory is fine. Your instincts are fine. That whisper inside you that says something isn't right here. That whisper has been right all along. You've just been trained, very lovingly, very patiently, to ignore it. Dark empathy is not a dramatic concept. It doesn't live in villains. It lives in relationships that you genuinely love, inside dynamics that have moments of real warmth and real history. That's what makes it so disorienting to name. Because naming it feels like a betrayal. It feels like saying something ugly about someone you care about. And for a woman who has spent her whole life protecting the people she loves from ugly things, that is an almost unbearable thing to do. So you don't name it, you just feel it. That weight we carry, that low-grade heaviness in the chest that you've maybe explained away as getting older, or hormones, or just life. But it's not life, it's a pattern. And patterns, once you can see them clearly, can be changed. That is what we're here to do together. Let's slow down for a moment, right here. Because before anything can shift, before any of this can actually land in a way that changes something for you, you have to be willing to do the hardest thing a compassionate woman is ever asked to do. You have to look clearly at someone you love, not to condemn them, not to build a case, but to see them honestly, fully, without rushing to excuse what you see. That takes courage, quietly enormous courage. The kind that doesn't look heroic from the outside, but feels like moving through concrete from the inside. So let me describe something. And I want you to notice, not think, just notice, whether any of this feels familiar. There is someone in your life who suffers loudly in your direction. When things go wrong for them, somehow the story always curves back around to something you did, or didn't do, or should have known to do. When you try to talk about your pain, there's a subtle shift, a redirect, a one-upmanship. a sudden crisis on their end that pulls the oxygen out of the room. You leave conversations feeling like you've run a marathon carrying someone else's luggage. And then, almost immediately, you feel guilty for thinking that, because they've had a hard life, because they really do struggle. Because who are you to measure suffering? That last question, who are you to measure suffering? That is not humility. That is the cage. Real humility says, I don't have all the answers. The cage says, your pain doesn't count until you've proven theirs doesn't exist. And you have been living in that cage so long the bars have started to feel like walls of a home. Here is one of the unspoken truths that women in the second half of life carry like stones in their pockets. We were taught that if we could just explain ourselves well enough, the people who misunderstand us would finally understand. That if we were patient enough, the dynamic would shift. That if we loved hard enough, the relationship would heal itself. And so we explain and explain. And explain again in different words, with more gentleness, with more care. We have entire conversations in our heads, rehearsing, refining, searching for the exact right sentence that will finally make them get it. And they don't get it. Not because they can't, but because understanding you would require them to give something up. It would require them to sit with their own discomfort instead of handing it to you. It would require them to be responsible for their own emotional world. And for someone who has learned to outsource that responsibility to your compassion, that is terrifying. And people do ugly things when they're terrified. They withdraw. They twist the narrative. They remind you of everything they've ever sacrificed. They become fragile in the exact moments you try to be strong. They cry when you set a boundary, go cold when you express a need, and somehow, by the end of every hard conversation, you're the one apologizing. Does that sound familiar? You don't have to answer out loud. The fact that you're still reading is answer enough. Here is what dark empathy looks like in the body. Because we don't just think these things, we feel them. And I want you to recognize yourself in this. It feels like low-level dread before certain phone calls. It feels like a kind of shrinking that happens before you walk into a certain room. It feels like choosing your words with the same careful precision you'd use to navigate a room full of furniture in the dark. Always bracing for the shin that's about to get bruised. It feels like relief when they cancel plans, followed immediately by guilt about the relief. It feels like being so finely tuned to another person's emotional weather that you've lost track of what your own sky looks like. That is not love sustaining you. That is vigilance exhausting you. And there is a difference, a profound, life-altering difference, between a relationship that asks you to be present and a relationship that requires you to be perpetually on guard. One asks for your heart. The other has taken up residence inside your nervous system. And your nervous system, dear woman, was never meant to be someone else's home. So here we are, together in this uncomfortable, necessary, oddly sacred space. Because this is the part where everything either shifts or doesn't. And what determines that isn't intelligence. It isn't willpower. It isn't even how much pain you've accumulated. What determines it is one single, trembling act of honesty that you have to be willing to offer yourself. You have to stop waiting for them to change first. I know how that lands. Because the mind immediately goes to, but that's not fair. And you're right, it isn't fair. None of this has been fair. It wasn't fair that you learned to shrink. It wasn't fair that your tenderness got mistaken for a resource to be drawn from instead of a gift freely given. It wasn't fair that somewhere along the way, your needs got quietly moved to the bottom of a list that never seems to reach the bottom. But here is the quiet whisper that changes everything. Waiting for fairness in a dynamic that was never built on fairness is its own kind of slow disappearing. You can be right about the unfairness and still be the one who has to move. Not because you caused this, but because you are the one reading these words. You are the one awake to what's happening. And consciousness, real consciousness, the kind that sees a pattern clearly and names it without flinching, that carries its own responsibility. The responsibility to act on what you now know. So what does that actually look like? Not in theory. Not in the clean language of self-help books. But in the real, complicated, Tuesday afternoon texture of your actual life. It starts much smaller than you think. It starts with a pause, not a confrontation. Not a speech you've rehearsed at 2 in the morning. Just a pause. A moment before you automatically reach toward someone else's distress, where you ask yourself one honest question: is this mine to carry? That question is a revolution disguised as a whisper, because you have been so conditioned to respond, to fix, to soothe, to absorb, that the pause itself will feel wrong at first. It will feel selfish. It will feel cold. Every old message you ever received about what a good woman does will rise up in that pause like a tide, telling you to just go ahead, just help, just make it okay again. Let the tide rise, let it fall, and stay in the pause a little longer. This is also where I need to say something that might sting a little, because I'd rather sting you briefly with the truth than soothe you indefinitely with something softer. You have participated in this, not because you're weak, not because something is wrong with you, but because the role felt familiar, because being needed felt, for a long time, like being loved. Because the version of yourself who had no needs was praised, and the version of yourself who did have needs was met with something. Disappointment, withdrawal, tension, that taught you very clearly which version was safer to be. You learned, you adapted, you survived. And now that you're here, in this season of life where there is less time for pretending and less patience for arrangements that cost you everything, you get to unlearn. Unlearning is not the same as leaving. It's not the same as declaring war. It is simply the slow, deliberate practice of no longer abandoning yourself in order to keep someone else comfortable. It looks like saying "I'll need to think about that" instead of immediately saying yes. It looks like letting a silence sit without rushing to fill it with reassurance. It looks like noticing when you feel that old familiar dread and choosing, just once, not to perform calm on top of it. It looks like telling one true thing about how you feel, not to change them, not to win, but simply because it is true and you deserve to exist in your own relationships as something more than a mirror for other people's emotions. It looks like reclaiming, piece by tender piece, the woman who existed before she learned that love required her disappearance. She is still in there. She never actually left. She's been standing in the back of the room all this time, arms full of everything she never put down, waiting for you to finally turn around and say, "I see you. I'm coming back for you. I'm so sorry it took this long." There's something that happens when a woman finally stops performing wellness. When she stops nodding through conversations that diminish her. When she stops translating her own pain into language mild enough not to inconvenience anyone. When she stops measuring her worth by how gracefully she absorbed what she never should have been asked to hold in the first place. What happens is this: she gets quiet. A different kind of quiet than the silence she used to maintain out of self-protection. This quiet isn't absence, it's presence. It's the particular stillness of a woman who has finally come home to herself. That is where we're going. And you're closer than you think. I want to speak plainly about something before we close this chapter together. Because the world will offer you a lot of noise about what healing is supposed to look like. It will tell you to set hard limits and mean them. It will tell you to audit your relationships like a balance sheet. It will offer you righteous anger as a destination, as though fury is the final form of freedom, and anger has its place. Grief has its place. The hot, clarifying rage of finally seeing what was done to your softness, that has its place. But it is not the place you want to live. Because the women I have known who've walked this road, who've recognized the dark empathy in their closest relationships, who've done the terrifying work of stopping the automatic self-erasure. The ones who came through to something resembling peace didn't arrive there through hardness. They arrived through discernment. There is a difference, and it matters enormously, between a woman who has built walls and a woman who has built wisdom. Walls keep everything out, including the love that was always genuine, the relationships that can actually grow, the moments of real tenderness that are still possible inside even complicated histories. Wisdom knows the difference. Wisdom lets the good in and holds the harmful at a distance, not with coldness, but with a clear-eyed, unshakable sense of what you will and will not make room for anymore. That is the goal, not a hardened heart, a discerning one. And here is the grace note in all of this. The thing I don't want you to miss as you carry these words back into your ordinary life: you do not have to resolve everything to begin healing. You don't have to have the defining conversation. You don't have to formally name what's been happening or confront it head on or restructure your entire life in a single courageous afternoon. Healing from dark empathy is not a dramatic event. It is a quiet, daily, unglamorous practice of choosing yourself in small moments, before the big ones even become necessary. It's the morning you wake up, and instead of immediately reaching for your phone to check whether someone is upset with you, you reach for your coffee and sit for 7 minutes in the silence of your own company. It's the afternoon you feel that old pull towards someone else's manufactured urgency, and you breathe through it instead of surrendering to it. It's the evening you tell the unspoken truth, the one that has been living in your chest for years, and you tell it softly, to yourself first, in the privacy of your own heart, and you do not immediately take it back. These small moments are not small. They are the architecture of a reclaimed life. I want to leave you with this, not as a conclusion, but as an opening. You have spent decades being the woman who made it easier for everyone else to exist. You metabolized other people's chaos so they didn't have to feel it. You loved in ways that asked nothing in return, and then quietly ached when nothing came back. You carried the weight we carry, all of us who learned too young that our feelings were the ones that could wait. They don't have to wait anymore. You are in the season of life where the truest, most radical thing you can do is decide that your inner world deserves the same devotion you have poured so faithfully, so beautifully into everyone else's. Not instead of loving people, while loving them, from a place that is full rather than endlessly depleted. From a self that is present rather than perpetually sacrificed. That version of you, the one who loves generously and protects herself wisely, she isn't a fantasy. She is simply who you were before the world taught you to make yourself convenient. And she has been waiting with extraordinary patience for exactly this moment